Sung Jinwoo now has 4 more weapons to use, and they have all improved his strength greatly, but let's see how good they all are in this updated weapons tier list. So as you can see right here, this is my previous tier list that I did do around like 5 months ago when Winterfang did release, where we have all of the very best weapons into the SS tier, going all the way down to the D tier where we have all of the worst weapons. But not to forget, we of course do have 4 brand new weapons, with them being Allon's Orb, Ennio's Roar, the Hero Sword, and finally the Radiru clan Spear. However, before I do make any brand new additions to this tier list, I do want to make a lot of changes because in my opinion a lot has changed with my opinions in this tier list, and as well I do want to give it a brand new look, as that's what I've been doing with all of my previous tier lists. So the tier list is now going to go from looking like this all the way to now looking like this, where we have a brand new look to the tier list as well as all of my changes made. I do also want to cover some of the specific changes that I did make and sort of the most important ones, because a lot of the weapons in the top tiers have actually moved down 1 tier all the way down to the S+ tier, and they are going to be Winterfang, Moonshadow, Thetis' Grimoire, and then also the Demon King's Daggers. So the reason I did move Winterfang all the way down from the SS tier down to the S+ tier was because as a DPS weapon, Winterfang just isn't quite on the level of the Divine Quarterstaff, which in my opinion is Jinwoo's best DPS weapon within the game, and I definitely think that weapon does deserve to be above Winterfang, which again is kind of why it's moved down to the S+ tier. Plus it doesn't really have all too much content to be used in right now as well, especially with the new Workshop of Brilliant Lights being weak to fire and also light. Moonshadow is also going to be joining Winterfang into the S+ tier, because in my opinion Moonshadow is of course still a very powerful weapon, but right now I've not really found myself using it within content outside of the teamfight modes. But that doesn't mean you can't obviously use it within the player mode, because you still can, and when you do look at the dark elements for Sung Jinwoo right now, in my opinion it's definitely one of the most outdated ones currently, as support Jinwoo for the dark elements tends to be used way more than his DPS version. Thetis' Grimoire is going to be the 3rd out of 4 weapons moving down into the S+ tier, because it's moving down there because pretty much for all of the same reasons as Moonshadow, but thanks to the release of Allon's Orb, Thetis' Grimoire no longer really has a place within the player mode, making it worse than Moonshadow for me, but I think it still deserves the S+ tier for now due to its effectiveness in teamfight content. The final top tier weapon moving down is going to be of course the Demon King's Daggers, and this is one of my favourite weapons in the game currently still, but I can't lie, just like Winterfang, it doesn't quite compete with the Divine Quarterstaff in terms of damage, so much that you can actually even use the Divine Quarterstaff over the Demon King's Daggers in win-based content alongside Stormbringer. Alright, so now that I've given all of my main reasoning for all of the biggest changes within this tier list, I think it's now time to move on to ranking the 4 brand new weapons, starting off with Allon's Orb. When using Allon's Orb, its main function and purpose is going to be to primarily buff the damage of Winterfang, but also his basic skill damage that he can do with his water skills, and this is going to be helped by the fact that what Allon's Orb can do is basically it can help increase your Jinwoo's precision and water damage by investing into intelligence stat points up to 200 intelligence. It can also apply a very strong buff called Rolling Tide through its A3 that can increase your Jinwoo's damage dealt by 20%, his water damage dealt by 20% as well, and it can even say when a water weapon skill does hit, you can inflict the Maelstrom effect onto the target for 20 seconds, and this debuff will also basically say it can increase the target's water damage taken by 8% for 20 seconds, stacking up to 4 times, totaling in up to a 32% damage increase. The weapon's A5 can further increase your Jinwoo stats even further, because when all of your weapons are equipped that are of the water elements, you can increase your Jinwoo's crit rate by 10%, and can even actually activate a buff called Rising Tide when you do have 200 intelligence points, which can increase the user's water damage dealt by 15% and also their water weapon skill damage by 60%, and it's all completely permanent. With all that being said, I do definitely think Allon's Orb is a very powerful weapon. However, I think because of Winterfang not being quite as good as the likes of the Divine Quarterstaff, I do then think it does deserve to still go all the way up into the S+ tier for now. Up next we have Ennio's Roar, and in my opinion this weapon is a very good weapon at dealing lots of damage, but can also help support your Jinwoo's other sources of damage like his Firestorm Kick basic skill, because thanks to this weapon's A1 you can increase Jinwoo's defense penetration by 16% when equipping all fire weapons, making it very good for the current statue guild boss. It also has very good synergy with the burn effect that is very easy for Jinwoo to apply thanks to the detonation basic skill that he does have on Dagger Toss, because it can help increase his damage dealt by another 25%. But then thanks to its A3 you can enhance the burning grudge effect that does apply when you use this weapon skill, that can help increase your fire damage by 15%, your boss damage dealt by 10%, and also your weapon skill damage by 100%. And finally, its A5 is very powerful, because using a fire weapon skill increases the user's fire weapon skill damage by 50% for 2.5 seconds, and can further enhance the effect of Ennio's Rage, that is the meteor that you can summon from the sky to do damage, as well as also the Brand of Adversary debuff that increases your pitch black rage damage by 100%. So then, as for where this weapon is going to rank within this tier list, I do think out of all of the DPS weapons within the game, I think this one does come the closest to the Divine Quarterstaff. However, because it does require a lot more setup and a lot more support to do that damage, I do currently think that it does deserve to go into the S plus tier, but I kind of do want to maybe put it into SS, but for now I'm going to put it into the S plus tier. Following that, we now have the Hero Sword, and this right now is one of my most favorite weapons in the game currently, because when you use this weapon skill, you can increase your light weapon skill damage by 45%, and also with its Undying Resolve buff, you can increase your light damage dealt by 25%, and can even decrease your skill mana point consumption by 20%, with it all being completely permanent outside of the light weapon skill buff. Through this weapon's A1 though, you can apply the Outstanding Perception buff that can increase your Jinwoo's precision by 5%, as well as also his crit rate by the same amount. Plus it can even increase his crit damage by 60%, with again it's all completely permanent, making it very, very powerful. The Hero Sword A3 is very, very strong because it can allow his weapon skill to do heavy break damage, but finally when it comes to its A5, you can apply the Demon King Slaying Sword effects that can increase your damage dealt to bosses by 50%, your light damage dealt by 35%, and can even further increase your ultimate skill damage dealt by 50%, which then all definitely shows why this weapon is very, very powerful. However, I do think because it is going to be a very limited weapon thanks to it being limited to the 3-run collab, I'm going to put it all the way into the S plus tier because not many people are going to be able to get it to A5. On to the very final weapon that I'm going to be ranking within this tier list, and that is the Radiru Clan's Double-Edged Spear. And out of the 2 fire weapons that have lately released, in my opinion, this is definitely the best one by far because it's used pretty much within every piece of content within the game right now when you do need the Jinwoo fire setup. Because what it can do is it can basically stack a buff called Morale that can stack up to 30 times, increasing your damage dealt by 1.2%, your fire basic skill damage by 0.5%, and your weapon skill damage by 1% with every stack that you do accumulate. But also, just like Ennio's Roar, it does have a very good amount of synergy with the burn effect, because when the user attacks do hit a target with the burn effect, you can activate Burning Will, with this being another buff that this weapon can apply that can increase your Jinwoo's fire damage dealt by 6%, as well as also his crit damage by 12%, stacking up to 5 times and can last for 15 seconds. Then on top of all of that, going back to the morale buff that you can apply with this weapon, once you have actually fully stacked it 30 times, you can actually activate a small support fire zone when hitting a target with a fire attack, and you can trigger this every 5 seconds, I believe, on A5, and it can deal damage equal to 600% of your Sung Jinwoo's attack, with it counting as a basic skill, but can further deal weak break damage, making it a decent source of break damage for your Sung Jinwoo, meaning as well it does let your Jinwoo use other basic skills that can focus on dealing more damage as opposed to dealing more break damage. Where then am I exactly going to be ranking this weapon within this current weapon tier list? Well, I think this is definitely one of the best weapons within the game right now because it does help your Sung Jinwoo's fire setup immensely, meaning I definitely think it's going to be very deservingly going to go into the SS tier. Alright, there you have it. That is my complete weapon tier list for Sung Jinwoo in solo leveling Arise, and overall, if you did enjoy this video or you just found it useful in general, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, I will see you all in the next video. Peace!